My name is Kaveh. I am 38 years old and I was born in Tehran, Iran, into a family devoted to strict Islamic traditions. From the moment I could speak, I was taught to fear Allah, obey my father, and respect the unyielding rules of our society. My father measured our worth by devotion, and my mother, although gentle, whispered prayers over us at night while I lay awake feeling a longing I could not name. I learned early that showing doubt meant shame, and shame was to be avoided at all costs. Our day felt like a performance. I bowed, I prayed, I memorized Quranic verses, yet in the quiet of my room, I felt an emptiness that gnawed at me. Even as a boy, I would watch the sky through my window and imagine a life beyond these walls. Questions formed silently inside me. Why do we live like this? Why is mercy mixed with fear? Why do some suffer so much while others flourish? Speaking aloud was impossible. Fear kept my lips sealed even as my heart screamed for something real, something alive. Growing up, the family expected perfection. My father demanded loyalty. My mother compliance. Any deviation was rebellion. The community always watched to exist. Authentically was dangerous. I often lay awake, heart pounding, imagining escape, yet bound by duty and fear. Inwardly, I longed for truth, for love, for a God who would not punish curiosity, but welcome it. Even amid this pressure, I achieved academically, socially, and later professionally. I learned early to wear a mask, pleasing everyone while hiding my inner storm. Yet no achievement, no praise, no honor could fill the emptiness inside me. I was starving spiritually, but I didn't know it. Yet, I remember nights when I could hear neighbors celebrating, laughing, their voices drifting through the alleyways. I longed for freedom, forbidden. Instead, I swallowed my curiosity, replaced it with obedience, and repeated rituals without understanding. Yet inside the seed of doubt quietly grew subtle questioning at a verse, a whisper of unease at injustice, enough to make me restless. I lay awake sometimes, imagining speaking my heart aloud and being loved anyway, but fear kept me silent. If you are watching this, I want you to know something. You are not alone in feeling lost, broken, searching. If my story touches even one heart, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Help others hear. There is hope even in the darkest places. God's love waits for us. This was the life I knew, the life that shaped me, but I could not have known. The storm that was coming, the events that would shake my faith to its core, the moment that would introduce me to a love I had never imagined. In my mid-20s, I became a covert agent for the Iranian government, outwardly disciplined, loyal, fearless. Inside, quietly unraveling every mission, required acts that gnawed at my conscience, surveillance on friends, manipulation, betrayal. I watched families torn apart by lies I helped spread. I reported secrets whispered in confidence. Every time I signed a dossier, every time I followed orders, I swallowed a piece of my soul. I remember one operation. Clearly, I had to extract information from a man who trusted me as a brother. I smiled, pretended loyalty, and gained his trust, knowing the outcome would destroy him. That night, lying in my cold apartment, I stared at the ceiling and felt bile rise in my throat. I whispered to the empty room, God, if you are there, forgive me, what have I done? But no answer came, only silence, heavy and mocking. Flashbacks of childhood. Obedience haunted me, lessons of fear and punishment, replayed with each deceitful act. My parents' voices, my teachers' reprimands, my communities. On a judgment, everything merged into constant pressure to conform. I was trained to obey without question, yet my heart screamed for truth. Even at the height of my career, I began asking questions privately. Why did God permit so much injustice? Why were the innocent punished and the guilty celebrated? My colleagues called me loyal. I called myself a traitor to my own conscience. Every day I balanced masks, the obedient agent, the devoted Muslim, the son, the neighbor, all while a storm brewed inside me. Paranoia. I became a constant companion. Every knock on the door, every phone call, every whisper felt like a threat. I was trapped in fear duty and moral compromise. Yet amid it all, a small voice, quiet but persistent, began to whisper, "There must be another way. There must be truth beyond this." Little did I know that voice was not just mine. It was the first stirrings of God's call, nudging me toward a life I could not yet imagine. I remember moments driving through Tehran. At night, the streetlights blurred by rain. A mind racing with what I had done and what I had to do. The faces of those I had betrayed haunted me. I felt sick to my stomach, and yet alive in a way I could not describe. The moral weight of my actions pressed on me, and the small flicker of hope whispered that I could find redemption. Somehow I spent nights pacing my apartment, planning missions, rehearsing lies, while inside I cried silently for freedom from the fear that had controlled me for decades. I prayed secretly for strength, for forgiveness, and for a chance to be more than a shadow in my own life. But I feared that asking would bring punishment or exposure. Every glance from colleagues, every word from superiors reminded me I could not trust anyone. Yet, even in that isolation, I felt the tug of something real, something I could not yet name. It was as if my soul remembered a life I had never lived, a longing for truth and love that no amount of obedience or fear could satisfy. I did not yet know it, but this moral and spiritual tension was. I'm building toward a breaking point, a moment when the walls I had built around myself would crumble, and I would be forced to confront not only my deeds, but the God I had silently questioned for so long. The storm inside me would not be ignored, and the journey from obedience and fear to faith and redemption was about to begin in ways I could never have anticipated. It happened during a mission I thought I could control. Everything went wrong. Betrayal came from someone I trusted, a man I considered a mentor, a brother in duty and in secrecy, and in one instant, the foundation of my life shattered. A life was lost because of me, and I realized I had been nothing more than a pawn, manipulated by men who claimed to serve God, but served only their own power. I felt my faith crumble, like dry clay slipping through my fingers. The God I had obeyed blindly seemed distant. Cold, absent, I lay on the floor of my safe house, trembling, the weight of all my choices crashing down on me. The prayers I had whispered for decades felt hollow. The verses I had memorized with trembling lips seemed meaningless, and I asked myself for the first time, is this all there is? Is this the God of mercy I was taught to love? Flashbacks of my childhood tortured me, the forced memorization of the Quran, the fear of punishment, the shame when I dared to ask questions, my mother's quiet prayers, my and father's harsh corrections, the community's watchful eyes. It all pressed down on me, and I felt the moral compass of my life spinning out of control. I walked the streets of Tehran that night, the city alien and menacing every corner, a reminder of secrets and lies, every shadow a reflection of my own betrayals. I was terrified and morally exhausted. I thought of those I had wronged, those who had trusted me. I thought of the lies I had told to survive the deceit I had embraced to serve. And I felt hollow, empty, like a man who had sold his soul for obedience and ambition. And in the deepest part of that despair, a terrifying thought surfaced. Maybe life had no meaning beyond survival and fear. Maybe there was no justice, no mercy, no love. The thought was a blade to my heart. I felt a coldness I had never known, a crushing despair that pressed on my chest and made it hard to breathe. I collapsed on a park bench, the city waking around me, yet I was frozen in a nightmare of my own making. I whispered to the empty sky, God, if you are there, show me, please, show me the truth. I cannot live like this anymore. Show me a way out, a light in the darkness. I did not know if my cry was heard, if it would be answered, but something inside me compelled me to speak it. Anyway, I felt the first flicker of surrender to a power greater than my own. I was exhausted from deceit, from fear, from loyalty to a system that had broken me, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to seek a life beyond obedience, beyond fear. I did. I not yet know the path. I only knew that I could no longer live, as I had the moral weight. The betrayal, the despair had broken me and left a rawness in my soul that could not be ignored. I walked the streets in silence, my mind racing, heart pounding every nerve, alert to danger, yet aware that something beyond danger was calling me, something real, loving, inviting. And I felt a tremor of hope that perhaps even in the midst of my guilt and failure, there could be a way forward, a way to be whole again. I did not yet see it clearly, but the seed of awakening had been planted, and nothing could stop it from growing. That night, sleep came reluctantly, as my mind churned with guilt, shame, and fear, and in the darkness, I dreamed I saw him, a man with eyes full of love, yet radiant with authority. I did not know his name, but I felt drawn to him. He did not speak, yet his presence filled the room. I felt seen, understood, and unjudged, as though every secret sin, every failure, every hidden doubt had been exposed and accepted. At the same time, I woke trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. I whispered, "Who are you?" And though no, and voice answered, I felt it in my soul, a warmth, a presence, a certainty that I was not alone. The heaviness that had clung to me for decades lifted. If only for a moment, I questioned myself. Was this a dream, a hallucination, something dangerous? Yet the peace that coursed through me was undeniable. I returned to my Quran, to my prayers, but everything felt different, hollow. The words I had recited for decades felt empty, the rituals meaningless. The fear that had defined my life seemed to shrink in the presence of something I could not yet name. Flashes of my life appeared in my mind, moments when I had glimpsed peace, longed for love and acceptance beyond my family's strict control. I realized now I had been searching, without knowing it, for this presence, this being who looked at me with compassion and understanding. I resisted. At first, fear gripped me. What would it mean to follow this vision? What would I lose? Who would I anger? Yet the longing in my soul would not be silenced. The dream lingered in my mind, day and night, a persistent whisper of hope I could not ignore. I began noticing things I had overlooked, the quiet prayers of my mother, the brief moments of wonder as a child, the feeling of awe when I looked at the sky or a flower. I realized these were fragments of a life I had never known, a life of freedom, a life of love, a life unbound by fear. The dream planted a seed deep in my heart, a seed of curiosity and desire, a longing for truth and for God. And though I did not yet understand the path I knew I had to follow, I could not turn back. The walls of fear and secrecy that had defined me for decades were starting to crumble, and I felt both terrified and exhilarated. The presence in my dream called me forward, towards something I could not yet see but desperately wanted to find. I whispered silently in my room at night, "Lord, if this is you, reveal yourself fully. I cannot live in darkness any longer." And though I had no answers yet, the longing for truth and the flicker of peace inside me told me that something real was waiting for me, a light in the darkness, a hand reaching for me, and I knew that my life would never be the same again, that the storm inside me had found a calm, and that calm would guide me toward a path I had never imagined. I could not stop thinking about the dream, the presence that had touched me, and I knew I had to act. Even though fear wrapped around me like chains, I downloaded a Bible app on my phone, my hands trembling as if committing some great betrayal. Each verse I opened felt alive. The words leapt off the screen and filled me with a strange warmth and a sense of understanding I had never known. Passages like, "Come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28 burned into my heart, and I felt my chest loosen after years of suffocating under fear and obedience. I watched online sermons in secret, hiding my screen whenever anyone approached. The exhilaration of forbidden knowledge coursed through me. I felt guilt mingled with awe, my conscience awakened after years of silence. Every verse I read, every testimony I watched, seemed like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. The rules of my life, the fear of family, the pressure of society, all felt hollow compared to the truth that was. I'm beginning to stir inside me. I wrestled with doubt. Could this really be real? Was I betraying my family, my country, my faith? And yet, the peace that welled up inside me was undeniable. My heart longed to know more. I spent nights pacing my apartment, reading, praying, reflecting on my life. The lies I had told, the moral compromises I had accepted, the betrayals I had committed. And through it all, a small voice whispered, "This is not the end. There is hope. There is truth." I could not yet see clearly, but a longing for freedom, for love, for real connection could not be ignored. I began memorizing verses in secret, speaking them softly under my breath, reciting the promises of a God I had never known, yet now felt intimately present. My nights were filled with prayer and reflection, my mind a storm of fear, hope, guilt, and longing. Yet I could not stop. I could not turn away. I whispered, "Lord, if this is, you show me, reveal yourself. I cannot live in fear any longer. Guide me, show me the path." And I felt a warmth, a reassurance that I was heard and that I was not alone. The moral weight of my past life pressed on me heavily, yet I could feel a shift within, a spark of courage that had lain dormant for decades. The thrill of forbidden truth mingled with fear, and I knew that I had to choose whether to continue this secret exploration or confront the reality of faith openly. Every small step, reading a verse, watching a sermon, attending a hidden online meeting, became a rebellion and a salvation. All at once, I could feel the storm inside me gathering, the weight of all I had done, the emptiness of my past obedience, and the tug of a love I had never known. And I realized that the moment of decision was approaching, whether I would remain in secrecy or step boldly into faith. The path was uncertain, the cost enormous, yet the presence that had visited me in the dream lingered and whispered courage. And I knew that this first step would change everything. I could not turn back, and I felt both terrified and alive. And I could not hide it forever. The changes in me were too obvious. My mother noticed first the quiet prayers that no longer carried the same fear, the distant look in my eyes, the hesitation in reciting verses. She confronted me one evening, her voice trembling with worry and accusation. "Kaveh, what are you doing? Have you forgotten? Allah, have you betrayed us?" And I tried to explain the longing, the dream, the presence I could not name, but the words felt inadequate and failed to reach her. She called my father, and suddenly our home became a battlefield. My father's anger was like a storm crashing over me, his voice filled with disbelief and rage. "You have dishonored the family. You have abandoned your faith. You will bring shame upon us all." And I stood frozen, the weight of years of obedience threatening to crush me. Yet I could not lie. I could not recite the old words with conviction. My heart was no longer captive to fear. Threats followed, whispers in the streets, accusations of apostasy from neighbors, friends avoiding me, The community turned its eyes away and I felt the isolation keenly. Every glance a reminder of danger, every conversation a test of loyalty. Yet even as fear clawed at me, I felt an inexplicable strength forming deep within my chest, a courage I did not know I possessed. Each confrontation forced me to stare at my own soul and confront my choices to renounce or to stand firm. I remembered the dream, the presence, the peace that had touched me, the warmth that had lifted the weight from my chest, and I whispered silently in the midst of shouting and judgment, "Lord, give me strength. I cannot recant. I will not abandon." You and the internal battle raged. I loved my family, but I could not surrender the truth I had glimpsed, even though doing so threatened everything I had ever known. The cost was enormous. The social isolation, the anger, the humiliation. Yet the spark of freedom could not be extinguished. Every threat, every insult only reinforced the reality that following this presence came, and with a price I had never imagined, I could never have prepared for. Yet I was no longer afraid of the pain it brought. Instead, I felt a resolve deep within me that anchored my soul, even when my parents' eyes burned with disappointment, even when whispers followed me in the streets, even when friends turned away. I felt the whisper of something real, a promise that no threat could undo that my life had been touched, and my heart claimed by a love far greater than fear. Each night, I prayed silently. I read. Secretly, I held on to verses memorized in secrecy, and the storm of judgment around me became a mirror of the storm I had carried inside, a test of courage and conviction. I knew the moment of decision was near, the choice between survival and truth, between fear and faith. And though the path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, and lonely, I felt the presence of the dream guiding me, urging me to step boldly into faith. I could not yet see the full path, but I knew I must walk it. I could not deny it. And the inner voice whispered, "Do not fear, I am with you." And I clung to that whisper as though it were my lifeline, because the world around me had turned against me. And yet, in that opposition, I discovered a strength I had never known, a resolve that would carry me to the next step, to declare openly the faith that had begun to claim me, a courage born not of self, but of the presence that had found me in my darkest hour. And though fear pressed like chains around my heart, I knew that standing firm was the only way forward, and I would not turn back. And the day came when I could no longer hide the truth inside me, the longing, the dream, the peace I had glimpsed. I could no longer whisper in secret. I had to speak it. I had to stand for what had begun to claim my soul. I was surrounded by family in our home, the air thick with expectation and fear. My heart raced, but for the first time, it raced, not with terror, but with a strange clarity. I took a deep breath and spoke. "I am no longer the person you think I am. I follow another path. I follow Christ." And disbelief, shock, and anger erupted around me. My father's eyes widened. My mother's lips trembled. I saw friends shrink back as if the walls themselves would swallow me up. Words like betrayal, apostasy, shame, and dishonor flew at me like knives. Yet I felt calm. The presence of the dream that had touched me decades ago now anchored my spirit. I could not recant, even as fear pressed hard against my chest. I remembered the nights spent secretly reading the Bible, the verses memorized in trembling silence, the sermons watched behind locked doors. Every step had led me to this moment, and I would not retreat. I told them of the dream, the love I had felt, the peace that had lifted the weight from my soul, and though they could not see it, I could feel it burning within me, a light that could not be extinguished. The memories of my past life returned in flashes, the lies I had told as a secret agent, the compromises I had accepted, the moral compromises and betrayals, the weight of obedience and fear. And yet, I realized that all of it had led me here to this moment of truth. The humiliation, the loss, the fear, these were the costs, but the freedom and love I had discovered outweighed every consequence. My mother wept quietly. My father's voice cracked with disbelief, yet I could feel something shift. Even as the anger remained, the presence within me whispered, "Do not fear, I am with you." And for the first time, I understood what courage really meant. Not the absence of fear, but standing firm in the presence of it. I thought of those who had abandoned me, who had judged me, the community that had turned away, and I felt sorrow, but not regret, because I knew the truth I had been given, the grace that had transformed me, and I could not go back. I could only move forward. Even as friends walked away, I could feel the embrace of a spiritual family forming around me, those unseen yet real, the voices of encouragement, the prayers whispered in secret. I felt a warmth that no judgment could extinguish. I had stepped into a light, and the fear of consequence no longer held power over me. I felt the surge of faith, courage, love, and freedom all mingling in my chest. I had chosen Christ, and nothing could undo it. The storm of my past life, the betrayal, the fear, the secrets, all faded into the background, replaced by clarity, by purpose, by a love so real it consumed all doubt. I could see the path ahead, though it was uncertain, dangerous, and lonely. I would walk it for the first time, unafraid, anchored by the presence that had visited me in dreams and claimed my soul. I knew the cost, but I also knew the reward, the joy, the freedom, the redemption, and I whispered silently, "Thank you, Lord, for finding me in my darkest hour, for giving me courage, for making me brave, for showing me a love I could not earn, yet could not resist." And in that moment, I felt complete, unshackled, and alive. The final confrontation came sooner than I expected. My father summoned me to sit before him in silence, the room heavy with tension, the familiar walls of my childhood now feeling like a courtroom where my soul was on trial. His eyes burned with anger, but beneath it I saw fear, the fear of losing a son, the fear of shame before the community. He spoke slowly, each word sharp as a blade, asking if the rumors were true, if I had truly abandoned Islam, if I had chosen disgrace over honor. My heart pounded, and for a moment, the child inside me wanted to apologize, to retreat into obedience, to restore peace at any cost. Memories flooded my mind, childhood prayers, the sound of my mother whispering, versus the expectations placed upon me since birth, and I felt the weight of generations pressing down on my shoulders. My father demanded I recite the Shahada again to prove my loyalty, to erase what he called madness. The room fell silent, and time seemed to slow. Fear gripped my chest, and doubt whispered that life, Ali, would be easier if I surrendered, if I spoke the familiar words and returned to safety. I imagined reconciliation, acceptance, the end of conflict. Yet another voice, deeper, calmer, reminded me of the dream, of the peace that had healed my broken spirit, of the love I had encountered. When I felt most lost, I realized this was not only a confrontation with my father, but a battle within my own soul, between fear and truth, between survival and faith. Tears filled my eyes as I struggled to speak my voice. On, trembling yet steady, I said, "I cannot deny what I have experienced. I cannot deny Christ." The words hung in the air like thunder. My father stood abruptly, anger shaking his body. Accusations poured out, betrayal, disgrace, deception. He warned me of consequences, isolation, danger, even death. His words cut deeply, and for a moment I felt the temptation to recant, to escape the pain. But the presence within me felt stronger than fear, a quiet assurance whispering, "Do not be afraid, I am with you." I felt an unexpected peace settle over me, even as chaos surrounded us. I spoke gently, telling him I still loved him, that my decision was not rebellion, but truth, that I had found a God of mercy and love who had met me in my darkest hour. My father's face hardened, unable to understand, unable to accept the distance between us, felt immense as if an invisible wall had risen, separating past and future. He turned away, refusing to look at me, and in that moment I understood the cost fully, the loss of approval, the unbreaking of expectations. The possibility of permanent separation pain surged through me, yet beneath it was freedom. The chains of fear that had controlled me since childhood shattered completely. I realized that faith was not comfort, but courage, not safety, but surrender to truth, even when it hurt deeply. I walked out of the room unsure of what awaited me outside, unsure of whether I would ever be welcomed back, yet strangely unafraid. The night air felt different, lighter, as though the burden I had carried all my life had fallen away. I looked up at the sky, remembering the boy who once searched for meaning beyond fear, and now I knew the answer had found me. The confrontation had ended, but the transformation had only begun. And though uncertainty lay ahead, my heart was steady, anchored in a peace no threat could steal, and I knew whatever came next, I would not walk alone. And after that night, everything changed. Yet strangely, nothing around me looked different. The same streets, the same city, the same faces, but inside me, the chains that had bound my heart for decades were gone. I woke the next morning expecting fear to return, expecting regret to crush me, yet instead, I felt peace, deep, steady, unshakable, like calm water after a violent storm. The silence in my apartment no longer felt lonely. It felt sacred. I knelt beside my bed, unsure how to pray as a Christian, yet words flowed naturally. Jesus, thank you for not abandoning me. Thank you for seeing me when I was lost. And as I spoke, tears fell freely, not from sorrow, but from relief. Years of guilt, shame, and hidden fear. Washing away, I began connecting with other believers, online people from different nations who called me brother, who prayed for me without knowing my past. Their kindness felt foreign, yet healing. I attended secret gatherings through video calls, listening to worship songs that stirred something deep. And within me, melodies of grace replacing the echoes of fear that once ruled my thoughts. I read the Bible daily, discovering stories of forgiveness, redemption, and transformation that mirrored my own journey. Verses like John 8:36, "Whom the Son sets free is free indeed," felt written directly for me. I realized freedom was not escape from hardship, but release from spiritual bondage. The anger of my family still lingered. Messages unanswered, calls ignored, whispers spreading through the community. Yet instead, and of bitterness, I felt compassion. I remembered how I once believed exactly as they did, how fear had shaped every reaction, and I prayed for them, quietly, asking God to reveal His love to them as He had to me. Flashbacks of my former life appeared, often missions filled with deception, nights haunted by guilt, the constant need to prove loyalty and control. But those memories no longer defined me. They became reminders of how far I had come, how grace could reach even someone like me. I sought baptism, quietly surrounded by a small group of believers in a simple room far from public eyes. As the water touched me, I felt as though years of darkness were being buried, and a new life rising within me. When I came out of the water, I breathed deeply, feeling lighter than I ever had before, as if my soul had finally aligned with truth. I understood then that rebirth was not forgetting the past, but allowing God to redeem it. Every scar, every mistake, every betrayal transformed into testimony. I began sharing my story, cautiously first with trusted believers, then with strangers online. And each time I spoke, I felt healing deepen. Fear lost its grip, replaced by purpose. I realized my life no longer belonged to secrecy or obedience to systems, but to truth and love. The emptiness that once haunted me was replaced by hope, the restless searching finally satisfied, not by answers alone, but by relationship with Christ. I still faced uncertainty, still navigated loss and rejection, yet peace remained constant, like a quiet voice reminding me, "You are mine, and I am with you." The chains of fear, guilt, and shame had fallen away, and though the road ahead remained unknown, I walked forward with confidence, knowing that freedom was not something I earned, but something freely given through grace. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to truly live. Today, when I look back at the man I once was, I hardly recognize him, the fearful boy shaped by expectation, the secret agent burdened by lies, the broken soul searching for meaning in darkness. All seem like distant shadows of a life redeemed. I now wake each morning with purpose, not driven by fear of punishment, but by gratitude for grace. I spend my days studying scripture, praying for those who once rejected me, and sharing my testimony wherever God opens a door, sometimes quietly, online, sometimes face with seekers who carry the same questions that once haunted me. I have learned that faith is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of peace within it. There are still moments when memories return, when loneliness whispers, when the cost of my decision feels heavy. Yet every time doubt approaches, I remember the dream, the encounter, the love that found me when I had nothing left to offer. And I am reminded that salvation was never earned. It was given freely through Jesus Christ. I have met believers who became family to me, people who welcomed me without demanding perfection, who showed me that the church is not a building, but a living body, united by love. Their prayers strengthened me when fear tried to return. Their encouragement reminded me that my story was not ending, but beginning. I began helping others who questioned, silently guiding them, gently, encouraging them to seek truth, honestly, without fear. And each story I heard reflected pieces of my own journey, the longing for freedom, the courage required to step into the unknown. I realized God was using my past, even my darkest moments, to bring light to others. What once brought shame now carried purpose. What once felt like loss became mission. I no longer hide my faith, though wisdom guides when and how I speak. I understand now that courage is daily obedience, choosing love over resentment, forgiveness over anger, hope over despair. I pray often for my family, believing that the same grace that transformed me can reach them too. Because faith taught me patience and compassion instead of judgment. Sometimes I imagine the young boy staring through his window, searching the sky for meaning, and I wish I could tell him that one day he would find peace, not in control, not in achievement, but in surrender to a Savior who sees every tear, every question, every hidden pain. My journey did not end with conversion. It began. There, every day, is a step of growth, learning to trust, learning to forgive, learning to live freely in God's love. And if you are listening to my story now, feeling trapped by fear, doubt, or emptiness, I want you to know there is hope. Jesus meets us in our darkest places, not to condemn us, but to restore us completely. My life stands as proof that no past is too broken, no soul too lost, no darkness too deep for His light. I once lived in shadows, but now I walk in freedom, not because I am strong, but because Christ is faithful. And my prayer for you is simple, that you would seek truth with an open heart, that you would dare to ask God to reveal Himself, and that you would discover the same peace that transformed my life forever. If this testimony touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Pray, seek, and never stop searching, because sometimes the journey that begins in fear ends in freedom, and the God who found me will meet you too.